Alrighty, I think we are live. Just double check, there we are. Beautiful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation tonight. Before we get going, I just wanted to let everyone know at home about some other virtual events we have coming up at Cape May Stage. So first, we're pleased to announce that we will now be presenting readings of plays every Thursday at 6 o'clock. So we're going to be switching that to weekly now, which we're really excited about. And if you're unable to watch live, you can also view them afterwards at the same link that we'll be streaming them. All of our readings are presented free, but donations are always welcome. Tomorrow we have a new play called Adrift, which is by Richard Alleman. It exposes a day in the life of a wealthy WASP couple trying to escape the horrors of a dystopian world by living full-time aboard an ultra-luxurious cruise ship turned condo colony. Roy and I were just talking about how it's a little bit too timely when we wish it wasn't as timely. It's a fascinating play. And then next week, we are really proud to present The Whipping Man by Matthew Lopez. This is going to reunite the cast of our crowd favorite 2016 production. For those not familiar with The Whipping Man, it examines a vital but not often spoken of period in American history, which is the post-Civil War South, as former slaves and slave masters struggle to acclimate to the new emancipated social order. A former slave master and two former slaves reunite, and the three must navigate their new relationship while settling with the demons from their past, and it culminates in this beautiful Passover Seder, which just kind of makes them decide where their loyalties lie. It's really, really fascinating. And we were so excited to bring back the three actors that did that production previously. And I'm not even lying when I say I got teared up as just doing the stage directions. I got teared up just during the rehearsal of that reading. It's absolutely fantastic. We also have our Broadway series still available on demand. Those are only available till the end of the month. At 7-day rental, $25 for each of those performances. You could see more of that at vimeo.com/Cape May Stage. And lastly, a lot of time and effort goes into these virtual events, and without, charitable gifts from our patrons, it just wouldn't be possible. If you consider making a tax-deductible donation, please visit capemaystage.org. There's a nice little donate button right on top. You can click that, and you'll automatically get a tax receipt emailed to you. For tonight's event, if there's any questions from anyone watching, please feel free to use the chat module or the question module on Vimeo. If you're on Facebook, just feel free to comment on the stream. Our marketing director, Denise, is lurking everywhere. She's amazing at it. She gets the questions and feeds them over to us. And I think I'm done babbling. So I'm going to hand it over to Schele and Roy so we can begin tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell. We are just so thrilled and delighted to have this conversation with Schele Williams. She's an accomplished actress, singer, dancer, director, producer, a lot of hyphens in there. So you must be a very, very busy lady, and we're very thankful that you've taken some time to chat with us. A long resume, but I will tell you that Schele's about to direct Aida, the Disney production on Broadway in 2021. So, before we even begin and get in, most importantly, and the reason we're really talking to you is that I wanted to talk mostly about Black Theater United, when you're one of the founders of that. But before we get there, because that'll be the bulk of our conversation, I just wanted to get to a moment just to find out a little bit about you. I'd love to know about you're involved in theater, where you're from, where you're trained, all that kind of stuff, and what brought you to this moment.
Well, Roy, it's wonderful to be with you, and it's wonderful to be with the Cape May family. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and my dad is a professional musician, and I grew up as a musician as well. I played the drums like he did, and I played in a lot of pits of a lot of shows growing up. And in my senior year, I auditioned for Dorothy and the Wiz, and that turned my entire world upside down. And I went from being in the pit to on stage, and I never left the stage. And I learned so much from my local organization called Muse Machine, which is an incredible arts organization in Dayton, Ohio that still exists to this day. And incredible artists like, Allison Janney, and, there's amazing artists that came out of Muse Machine. We're all from the Dayton area. So I made my way to New York, and I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. and toured Europe for many years. And my first Broadway show was Rent. I was in the show. I was the dance captain of the first national tour. And shortly after that, I became the production dance supervisor and maintained all of the productions and set productions in Germany, Japan, and Australia. So that was my job for a very long time, for 4 years. And then I went on to become in the original Broadway cast of Aida. So I was in the show as Nehebka and an Aida understudy and standby from opening night to closing night. And when that show closed, I became a director, and I have never looked back.
Good for you. Wow, that's a wonderful story. I love that story. But would you tell us a little bit about Black Theater United, how it got started, um, why it got started? What is it?
Well, the catalyst of Black Theater United really came from the entire world looking at George Floyd, getting brutally murdered for, over 8 minutes, us all watching that, seeing it from the perspective of, watching this man beg for his life, watching the officer that killed him, watching the other officers, his accomplice who stood by, watching the passersby begging for his life, pleading for his life. And then looking at the young woman, the teenage girl who captured it on film, knowing that she was sacrificing a part of her youth to do so. That young woman will never be the same, but she certainly did. She was brave enough to give us all a glimpse at what she was looking at and what we must all look at and never turn away from. She allowed us to see who we are in that moment. I have certainly known for many years, and I certainly think about the incredible brutalization of Black people in America. It's something I think about every time I am out. I think about it with my children. I think about it with my nephews and my brother-in-law and my dad. I know that the world is different for me, and it has been for a very long time. It's different for all of us who are Black in America. And for the first time, I think a lot of my friends were seeing it. I wrote a Facebook post talking about what it is like in this moment as a Black woman, what it is like in this business as a Black artist. And many of us were feeling the same way. A lot of our theaters and organizations and places that we had worked for many years were putting out these statements of solidarity and support, but they seemed very shallow given the practices of some of these organizations and even, the leadership of the organizations, the lack of diversity in them. Their actions spoke louder than their words. And we needed to have a conversation about that. It's one thing to say, I support you, and it's another thing to show that you support us. And how do you support us? What does that look like? What does that mean? How do you define that? Are you living up to the words in your mission statement? And so, it was with a lot of pain that a number of us came together. 19 of us came together. I got a call from Audra McDonald that said, there's a meeting tonight at 9:00. Can you be there? We all need to talk. And it was an incredible group of 19 people. It was Audra and LaShawn and Brian Stokes Mitchell and Allison Tucker Mitchell and Vanessa Williams, Darius DeHaas, Felicia Rashad, Billy Porter, Wendell Pierce, Natasha Yvette Williams. It was an incredible group of people that were all in pain. Well, we were all hurting because we all felt this acute urgency to do something in our country, to say something. We all knew that we had a platform and that we had even the tiniest bit of power to be able to say something. And we knew that if we came together and we united our platforms, that our voice could be louder. We could be a louder chorus in this moment. So we had courageous conversations for about a week. we talked every night. And not necessarily about what the solutions were. We weren't like, and this is how we're going to fix everything. A lot of the things we talked about was our own pain, and really figuring out what fire needed to be put out first. And our first focus seemed to be, we need to better understand what is happening in this country. We need to understand institutional racism. And if we can begin to find a way to dismantle that, to talk about this, to chart a course for that, then we can apply that to our own industry. So we first thought, how can we use our voice for the greater good in the world? And then how do we use that as a sample for what we can do inside theater? And that's why our very first initiative was partnering with Leader Abrams and Dr. Janine Abrams McLean to talk about the census. We actually, in our very first week, were on the phone with Stacey Abrams, and we said, talk to us about, what's going on and what we can do. The very first town hall we had was with Dr. Cheryl Eiffel, because we knew that if we wanted to build an organization that was going to be around for 100+ years, that we needed to build an organization. We needed to model ourselves after one of the best civil rights organizations. So she came and talked to us about the NAACP and things that we can be doing in this moment. And that was our first town hall that we shared with the world. And then the second one was with Leader Abrams and Dr. Janine Abrams McLean to talk about the census. So it's been a busy 10 weeks. And we released a new campaign actually yesterday called Only One of Me, that is now running on ABC, and it is starring Billy Porter and Misty Copeland. And there are 2 census ads that we shot last week that I directed that are on social, but also running on ABC currently.
Super. I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing with the census in particular, but I mean, all of us, I think it was such an interesting moment in our history, in our shared history, because it was a global circumstance. I mean, people not just in the United States, but people in Europe, people all over the world seem to feel the same, or not perhaps not the same pain, but certainly the pain that you were identifying. I know for me personally, I said this to someone, that what really hurt me was it upset my own myth. And I'm a storyteller, and I had certain myths that I had to come to terms with and say, hey, I know a lot of what's going on is not something that's brand new. Of course, I know that, but I never actually really saw it in the way that video. It's like what happened in Vietnam in the 60s. It was in our living room. And it really, I think it made an enormous change in society. So tell me a little bit, if you can, about your own, you talked about your own pain, if you feel comfortable. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable, I'd be interested in hearing, because you obviously, you're a woman of extraordinary talent to have gotten where you are. It doesn't seem like you were pushed away from your work. You celebrate your work. Tell me things that were not so fun. There must have been places along the way where it wasn't always just Broadway and glamour and and touring Europe.
I will tell you, Roy, I authentically have never been my full self in any room I've ever been in, because I always have to calibrate my Blackness to the amount that the room can tolerate. And that's something that I think it is that many friends that have known Black actors and actresses and creatives are just now realizing that that is the space that we have been navigating for a long time. It is not a safe space. If it was, there would be, there's been one woman in the history of musical theater who has directed a musical, a Black woman. And it is ridiculous. There is a bias there,
Right.
Clearly, because there have been a lot of talented Black women, but there's been one in 101 years. Like that's unbelievable. And yet there's a clear bias that has had that door closed. There have been Black women who've directed plays, and there's been less than 10 of them, but there have been. But there is, there are not a lot of me out there. I know a lot of Black women directors, but they don't pass the threshold. And even as I have negotiated contracts, and people have said to me, "Oh, but you've never directed a Broadway play," and I said, "Well, it's kind of amazing because I know tons of white men who have had flops. I've never lost $15 million. It seems like I'm a better bet, but it's a very small club with the same players, and they can fail up.
Right.
I know as I'm directing Aida that everything I do must be right, or that door will close and other Black women will not be able to come through it. That is a certain pressure that I walk into a room with. When I tech at a regional theater, I cannot tell you how many times I've had, the crews, explain to me, "Well, let me explain to you how a winch works." And I was like, oh my good God. I've directed shows in Vegas. I understand how technology works. There's the gender bias, but there's also, when a theater's reaching out to me to direct a play, they seldom see the totality of me. They will reach out to me to direct a Black play, which I am happy for, because I'd much rather I direct a Black play than a white guy direct a Black play. However, they don't immediately identify me as a woman, as a mother, as a human who can tell other stories. I have experiences that are vast, and yet I am limited. I am seen as very limited in the stories that I am capable of telling, in a way that my white male peers can tell any story. They can tell my story, they can tell women's stories, they can tell immigrant stories, they can tell any story. But for some reason, there is a box as a creative that I have been put in. And I know that. And I don't think that until very recently, we've had the courageous conversations to call that out. And that is, so, even when I talk about the fear that I experience as a Black woman in America, I've had friends that reach out to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that you felt that way. Things like that happen to you." And it's as if there's as I jokingly say, they think you're one of the good Blacks. How could that happen to you? And they don't realize that, I got pulled over by a cop. This was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I was pregnant. I was coming from Trader Joe's. I had turned left on the same street that I turn left on all the time, but I guess I'd never done it on a Monday and through Friday between 3 and 6, which is when you cannot turn left. And so I made this left turn and the sirens go off, and I literally was shaking so badly because I thought I could die. I was shaking so badly, I couldn't find my registration that was in the glove compartment, in the same little booklet that it's always in. I was shaking so desperately because I just thought, they're going to kill me and my baby. Because why would I have any other? No one is looking at my pedigree when I get pulled over. No one's saying, "Oh, by the way, didn't you work on that show? I'm just another Black woman." So in that moment, am I an inconvenience or am I a human? Do I deserve leniency or do I deserve to be punished? Am I a danger or am I a wife and a daughter? That is what life is like in America. There are places that I navigate with privilege, and there are places that I navigate where I am perceived as a predator just because I am in the room. That's the duality.
Yes. So obviously we're not going to solve that in the next 10 minutes here in this conversation, but what would success in your mind begin to look like?
Well, are you quantifying that for the world or for theater or?
Either. Let's start with the world and then make it more about
I think, the first thing we need to do is just start having very honest conversations. We've been telling stories since the beginning of time. And especially the story of America are stories that are half told. When I talk to my daughters, for example, about, George Washington, I say, George Washington was the first president and he did a lot of great things, but he also signed the Fugitive Slave Act. And he made it possible that a Black person could never run away and be free. It is important that you understand that no person is so great and so perfect that they are lionized. That what he did was he eliminated the option of freedom for Black people. You could not escape to freedom. And that's something that we don't tell. We say he's the first president of the United States and he did all these great things and look at him in the war. And they talk all but it's really important that we understand the whole story.
Yes.
And that's what I feel like is missing. When we talk about the building of America and we talk about the stories of slave owners and, and I've said this to, my nephews who are older than my children. My nephew is 16 years old. And I said, here's something, there are words we have now that we never see in our history books about the act of owning slaves and the crimes that slave owners committed. We know the words now. They're called murderer, pedophile, rapist, batterer. Those aren't words that exist in our history books. Those are not the stories that we tell. We look at the great lands and we look at the plantations and we look at the economic growth that they provided for America. But we don't talk about the legacy of crime. And so until we start, and it's not about going back and relitigating the history, but it's really important that we contextualize how we got here, who we are, how we've come to be, what does it mean, how we define meritocracy. Have the scales been tipped? Have they been weighted for a long time? And if that is true, then how do we course correct? And I think we have to course correct first by telling the truth. And then we have to look in the mirror and actually see what we see, and then make the effort to change our behaviors. It takes work. And I actually, have said many times that I think if there was any industry that was ever capable of doing this, I think it's theater people.
Yep.
Because we are people who rehearse. We believe in doing something over and over and over until we get it right. Yep. And we believe in mining for the truth. We really do. We've settled for a lot less. We've settled for, telling stories that, are only for entertainment value. And I do believe it's important to have joy. But I don't believe that it should be at the expense of humanity and dignity.
Well, something you just said really resonated with me as storytellers, as theater people. And that is, I'm older than you. I know I am. I grew up in the 1950s and early 60s in Brooklyn, New York. I'm from Brooklyn.
That's where I am. I'm in Brooklyn.
That's where you are now, yeah. Well, and growing up, the history books, the only Black people who were mentioned, as I remember, were George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass. Pretty much that was maybe one or two other people, but that was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. And even before George Floyd, I'm now finding that there are stories that are being told about, for example, the numbers, those amazing women who were
hidden figures.
Figures.
Katherine Johnson, yes.
Yeah, I had no idea until that movie came out.
Neither did I, Roy.
Yeah, and I think most people didn't. But that kind of storytelling, I think, is very powerful, because it, without, drink this medicine, you can watch something that is both entertaining and joyful, and also changes your worldview.
Yeah.
That it was women, first of all, and also what they went through.
Yes.
It's painful for some of us. I think for most of us, when we see people being mistreated, you think, oh my God, they didn't have a bathroom? I mean, what?
Yeah.
That's nuts. And over and over again, I think more and more stories are coming out. I'm finding out about all kinds of people every day now. I mean, particularly now, I think because of this movement, I think now it's a moment in time, so to speak.
Yeah. It is. It's incredible. The more and more I'm learning is these incredible stories of Black history that I feel in some ways I've been robbed of knowing this incredible legacy of greatness that I descend from, and how different the entire world would be, not just Black people, but everyone in the country would benefit from knowing the incredible legacy of all Americans.
Sure.
Thinking about, I talked with David Henry Wong, who I know, who's is a friend of yours and was going to be down here this summer with you.
He's not a friend, he's an acquaintance. I'd be honored to have him as a friend, but he's just an acquaintance of mine. Yes, he was supposed to come.
He was supposed to come this summer. David and I were talking, and it was the anniversary of the Mississippi Railroad. And he went down, and I said, I think it's such a great story about, the Chinese migration and the railroads.
Sure.
And he was like, how do you know that? And I was like, I know, because it was in a play that I directed. And so I did a lot of research. But how many people don't know that story?
Right. Well, he talked about, David spoke about going to see King and I and having no Asian people on the stage when I was a little kid, just what that did to him. It was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it is profound. And I think that, when we talk about theater, we talk about Hollywood, we talk about, the gatekeepers, who's telling the story,
Mm-hmm.
how are the stories being told, what is the lens through which the story is being told. That's the, going back to theater, what have been some of the obstacles, coming in and saying, hey, I really want to do this play, and hearing we don't think that's commercial. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's not the version of Blackness that this, any particular artistic director or theater thinks the audience is willing to tolerate.
Right.
There is it's a tough thing that I've struggled with for many years. And now finally, pieces that I were trying to get done 8 and 9 years ago, people were like, hey, that show that you asked about? And I'm like, oh yeah, you finally caught up. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. I am grateful that for all the people that have died and for so many years, that if George Floyd had to perish, his death was not in vain, that his death was a catalyst for so much change. Yeah. And I'm heartbroken for his children.
Of course.
And I can't imagine how hard it is for us to watch that, but to, even think about, that's the thing that people often don't think about, is that, he was a dad. He was a guy who made mistakes, but didn't deserve to die for it. And it's, he is one of many. And there have been a few since his passing of the same thing, You fall asleep in a car and you're running away after you've been patted down, and they know you don't have a gun because they patted you down, and still you get shot in the back and you die for falling asleep in a car. That's what it means to be Black in America. Yeah. That is your crime.
Or going for a jog, even.
Going for a jog.
Yeah. Those things are so painful to all of us. it's unspeakable. It's just
Yeah.
unspeakable.
It's
I
hard
was.
to explain to a child too.
Mhm.
I've got 2 little girls, and it's hard. It's hard to talk
How
about.
old are your children?
My oldest is 10, and my youngest will be 9 in 2 weeks.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is a really difficult conversation, and I know many people who have had conversations with their children about what it is and how to act in front of police and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, there's a moment, when I have to teach my girls that, like, and it has already begun, it started at 5, but there's a moment when you go, there's 5 golden years where you get to be a child, and then I have to teach you what it means to be Black. And it's not because it's something they need to learn, it's for something that they need to steel themselves for, because the world is going to start teaching them, treating them differently. And like clockwork, it's exactly what happens.
Mm. Yes. Well, I was wondering if the audience might like to ask questions of Shelley or comment, or not, you don't have to have a question, you can even have a comment if you'd like. Maybe we'll open it up to viewers if there are any. I mean, if there are people out there, I don't even know, Mitchell.
One question I received just about the kind of timing of everything. Shelley, what are your thoughts on, was the pandemic kind of a helpful tool in this movement because people were able to focus on a larger issue? How do you feel that if there wasn't something so kind of catastrophically global and the George Floyd incident happened, do you think it would have kind of had the same outcome?
Yeah, I think the pandemic had everything to do with it, honestly, because, when you think about, Trayvon Martin had Skittles and a hoodie. Like, this kid was like, you don't belong in this neighborhood. He didn't do anything wrong. Someone just, George just decided, like, you don't belong in this neighborhood and I'm going to kill you. Like, there is no, the young man who got killed in the car for playing music too loud at a gas station. Like, Tamir Rice, with a water gun, gets like shot by police officers. This is a little kid. There is yeah, I mean, yes, the pandemic had everything to do with it.
It's just so crazy.
It's like everybody's sitting still, everybody feels vulnerable, everyone feels fragile.
I wonder
Life
too,
is something different.
and not to politicize this, and I don't mean to at all, because I know there are people who have different ideas than I do politically. Um, but I think there are many on the right. I'm outspoken on the left, but people who are on the right, this particular time has also had given an opportunity for some people to be so extreme in their thoughts and their actions that it's something to react against if in terms of the leadership we have right now in our country. And I'm wondering if we're about to elect a president in a couple of 2 months, um, if that has anything to do with it as well. This moment in time that we're in a pandemic, we're at home, we're uh, locked in one particular place, and I think there's a confluence of all of those things at once.
Yeah, I the thing that's so interesting is I sit down with my children, and as soon as the pandemic hit, and in early March, I had just started rehearsals for Aida. We were in our 3rd day of rehearsal when, everything shut down. We were in the rehearsal room. Right after that following weekend, I believe I had COVID. I had very scary 5 nights, 5 days of breathing. I thankfully did not have to go to the hospital. But it was I have asthma. Like, it was, I've had some rough nights for asthma, but this was something unlike I had ever experienced. And we said we will. And so our family's motto is we will thrive, not just survive this. And we have leaned into, every week, at the end of every week, we talk about like, what was great. And, we've done a lot of baking and like I've gained everybody's weight. Everybody else, but like I've gained it all. We've done a lot of baking. We play a lot of games. We go on like, nature walks in the morning. There are things that are incredibly inconvenient. But last night when we were talking about, my kids are going to remote school and, we have the option in New York to send the kids to school. And we talked about how, we've decided it was really important to make space for kids that really need to be there. And as much as we'd like for them to be with their friends, we really want to mitigate the risk for their teachers. And we want to, give everyone as much room and as much air as possible. So we're going to stay in. And it was, a decision that my husband and I made, but we wanted to talk with the girls so they understood the reason why we made it and that the sacrifice that they were making was of great generosity. And it wasn't just a matter of convenience. This is a moment when we understand our privilege and we'd like to have the kids in school and we'd love to have them socialized, but that's a nice to have, and some kids really need it. So we had that, and we were talking about things that we're grateful for in this moment. And my daughter said, the earth is healing. The environment is doing really well. And my other daughter said, I never quite understood all that you've done, but I've heard you on so many Zooms, and now I feel like I really know what you do for a living. It's like, there were things that I didn't expect, that I've never spent so much time with my kids. And I know that time is going to go by fast and sometimes they make me crazy being all together, but I'm never going to get this time back. Like never, ever. Like they're going to go to college and they're going to be going in 10,000 directions. And I can look at all the ways that this is inconvenient and awful. But the other side of it is, my goodness gracious, these tiny humans would have been away from me 7 hours a day. They would have gone to sleepaway camp. And I was given the gift of time with them. And I will cherish every moment, every aggravating moment. I will cherish that. And I know that when I'm back in rooms with people again, the value, that how much I will cherish what it means to be together, things that I've taken for granted. When I get to take my mask off and, when that day happens and we can safely do that again, and it will come, I will have a different appreciation for what it means to gather, what it means to breathe air without a mask, what it means to see a whole face and smile. We have a thing that we do when we go on our morning walks. And I say to the girls, it is important that you say good morning to every person that you see, because it is harder and harder for people to connect. And so we're going to do it with our voices, and we're going to say hello, good morning, because we need each other more than ever.
It's beautiful. I love, just the poetic way to look at the pandemic as a gift of time, and kind of how you spent that time. And a lot of people did a lot of really great things with it, such as you. Just fantastic. Something you said earlier really just hit me really hard, with just not ever being comfortable in a room, because kind of checking your level of Blackness. That is, I'm an out gay man, and that is something that I can totally relate to, growing up as a closet. How much of myself am I allowed to let out? How much should I hold back? It's entirely different for you, obviously. Do you have any advice for people that kind of feel that same way, that they feel like they need to restrict themselves because of that? Are there things that you've done that have helped?
Well, listen, it's going to be room to room, right? Because I can't tell them like, say what you really think. And like, because I don't know if there'll be reprisal, right? I cannot say that. But I do know that I'm not a crass person. That's not who my parents raised me to be. There is no version of me that is completely different than the version you're meeting right now. However, there is a version that I do say, I feel really uncomfortable with that line. And I do think that that is sexist, that it's crossing it. There's a version of me that is more outspoken, and that is not the right person to be choreographing this show. Those moves are offensive. That line is demeaning. There are things that there is a certain, I'm giving myself more permission to be braver in spaces because the room is finally attuned to listening, that the person with the credibility and the lived experience should have the ability to speak out. That should be a given. That is what's shifted. And I think that will be the biggest shift going into the next time that we all gather to make theater together. I've been in shows where like I'm the only person with kids and the story is about something with a kid. And I made a comment to a writer and the writer was like, no. I was like, oh God, like, and everyone was just, and I was like, this is the most absurd experience. But yes, you know everything. You've never had a child. Like it just, it's absurd, but it has happened for years.
Sure.
It's happened for years, and I'm hoping that it happens less. Because I think that the least that we can do is tell the truest stories that we can. Like, I think that's the minimum that we can do, is do the truest version of humanity that we can. And that means that people who have always had the answers need to be the people who are always seeking the answers. And that subtle shift is, I think, what's going to be the difference of, true leadership and the people that can go the distance.
I agree. I must say that many times it's listening rather than speaking where one really can lead.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say too that all of us have different parts of ourselves that we reveal and hide depending upon the appropriateness of the circumstance. Whether you're an out gay guy or you're Black, or in my case I'm Jewish. I don't walk around talking like Jackie Mason when I'm not, when I'm with a bunch of other people who are Jewish. What you're seeing right now is who I am, I would say, most of the time. However, there's also, as an actor too, I've accessed parts of my personality that I can't do in life because I would be arrested if I was to be that violent, that the character can be, but I can't be. So I think we all need to see each other and allow ourselves to be seen. The word theater, as I'm sure you know, means the seeing place. It's the place that you can see each other. And I remember even in Cape May, a little town that I adore, and I was invited to the yacht club, and at my table were a Black director who I'd hired, an Asian designer, and me, a Jewish guy, and a lovely man who I didn't know came over and said something like, "We're so glad you people are here." All the ethnic people. I laughed, and it was a joke, and it was all good. But it was a place where, in fact, when my friend who was the director said, "I'm the only person of color in this room," I said, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah.
He knew that was the first thing he said. And in fact, when he walked in with my wife. I came in first, and they came in a little bit later. She told me, he later said, "I'm really glad you're with me." Not in any way that he was any danger, because they were lovely and welcoming in every way. But what you're describing is very real.
But you feel othered. You feel, very, very different. It's amazing. Prior to, directing, being announced that I was directing Aida, and certainly like directing a show for Disney has its own cachet, I would go to, theater parties and sometimes be the only Black person in the room. And it was amazing to me that people wouldn't come over and say hello. And it
Really?
was like, who are you? I don't recognize you, and just kind of move on. And the thing that I can't always kind of wrap my head around, and I always call it like home training, is what my mother would call it, is I can't imagine seeing someone who I know looks like they're new to a space and not going over and making them feel welcome.
Sure.
And the difference of when suddenly like it was announced that I was directing Aida, and like there was like, pictures around and people knew I'd RSVP'd, and people who'd beeline over to me and they're like, "Oh, Schele, I'm so happy you're here." And I was like, yeah, I've been here for the last 3 years at the same luncheon and no one talked to me. Again, I was still the only Black person in the room. But suddenly the fact that an institution has condoned me and sanctioned me and put their stamp of approval on me has allowed your humanity to deem me okay to speak to.
Yeah.
I really would have preferred just someone to say, "I've never seen you here before. How are you? I'm welcome." Like those kind of just small kindnesses. Like it's really just like
That's just good manners, isn't it? At the end of the day.
kindness.
Yeah.
Those, those moments when they don't happen, they tell you that the room doesn't want you. And then it's really hard to continue in a business that you feel always othered in. And so I'm excited to get back to work for like 1,000 reasons, as we all are. But I can't wait to walk into rooms that I feel like want me in them and know who I am when I get there. And not like my reputation, but like really are welcoming me as a Black woman into the room and want to both listen and share.
Do a few comments and questions from our audience. First, a comment from Sharnita Johnson. She just wanted to say, Schele, thank you for speaking up and speaking out.
Thanks, Sharnita.
Absolutely. And then the next question comes with an invitation, which is always exciting. This is from
this invitation.
It's always exciting, right? This is from Leslie Martell, who is the director of our board of directors. She's the president of our board of directors for Cape May Stage. She just wanted to say, first off, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And she's extending an invitation for you and your family to Cape May whenever you like, whenever the world will allow it. We'd love to have you as our guest. And she would just like to know, what, in your opinion, do you feel like, it's the easiest question, right? What should small regional theaters do to kind of help this movement flourish?
Oh my goodness.
It's a simple question.
The first thing that I say to people when they ask a question is I say, first, like, look in the mirror as an organization. And I know that you all have been doing this work already. And I know that your board has been doing this work to say, are we who we want to be? Are we living up to our mission statement? And if we are not, then what steps do we know that we need to take to correct that? If you do not have a diverse board, diversify your board. And not just diversify your board, but diversify your executive team on your board, because we all know those the people who really make decisions. So, really diversify, the tops of your ranks. If you are, looking at a season and you want to produce diverse works, think about the storytellers that you're employing to tell those works. Who is the director? Who's the choreographer? If there's someone writing the book, who's the person who's going to like judge the book, or who's going to, really thinking about, are we doing the most authentic versions of these stories that we can? And then take responsibility. If there are things that you feel like, that wasn't the best version of ourselves, and we would like to course correct in these areas, but we want to take responsibility for this thing that we did, or this thing that we said, or, saying something like that to a community is, I think, probably one of the most powerful, to say, we've now seen ourselves through new eyes and we want to be better. And these are the steps that we're taking to do that. You will garner trust in the communities that you're trying to build bridges with. But to pretend like nothing happened. We're moving on. Everything's great. We found a Black person for the board. Let's go on. Like those kind of like gestures don't ring true. So to me, as I say to my children, if you say I'm sorry, I always say what for? And they have to say what for. And then I say, okay, and what's the next thing? And they say, how can I help? So I'm sorry. I pushed you down on my way to dinner. Are you hurt? How can I help? Right. So I think it's all of those steps, taking responsibility, acknowledging what the issue was, and then figuring out how to make that better or how to course correct.
I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Don't think I have any other questions. Is there anything you wanted to bring up that wasn't discussed?
Yes, I have one last one.
I was going to say, I love Kate so much, and I just have to say that out loud.
We all do. Oh my Lord.
we have been on the front lines and fought some incredible battles on the board of the Empire State Pride agenda. And I sat on the board of the Empire State Pride agenda because I have so many friends that are gay.
Sure.
And I could not fathom in my mind why any of my friends or anyone could have rights that I couldn't. And it was so deeply personal to me that I knew that every right that I had in this country as a Black woman was fought by allies, because it takes the majority to win any kind of legislation of anything, right? It takes really the hearts and minds of the majority must be switched for that to happen. And in this unique moment, I was the majority. I was a straight person in America who could make a difference. And I took that fight and continue to take LGBTQI rights very personally. And when Kate, called me and she was like, I'm rolling up my sleeves because this is my fight too, that I'm here with you today.
Oh, got goosebumps. I appreciate you being an ally. That's always, like you said, it's the allies that that make the biggest difference. And I love that the disadvantaged communities can have each other's back.
Yeah.
Like this year for Pride, we were all just like, nope, we'll hand it over to Black Lives Matter this year. It is the much more important focus. We can be prideful any day, but this month we need to hand that platform over. And it's lovely seeing those kind of allyships work together. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, Roy, you were going to ask a question.
Well, actually, I'm seeing when we're getting close to when we need to end, but I was going to say that Cape May Stage is an ally both to the Black Lives Movement and to LGBTQ movements. We have, put our actions, not just where our words are, but
yeah,
we are allies. So please know that. And if I intend to continue to look in the mirror, but if you see something in the mirror that I don't, please know that you're always welcome, and always my doors are always open and my ears are always open. And I appreciate you. I appreciate very much that Kate introduced us, and thankful for that, very grateful for that. And grateful to everybody who participated on this board, on this call.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Schele, I can't wait for you to come to Cape May. We're going to get drinks. Oh my God, it's going to be, we have some wonderful beachside bars. We're going to have a wonderful time. Maskless, all of it. It's going to be amazing.
I will be there. I cannot wait.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was one of our best presentations we've had, in my opinion. If for some reason you're watching this after our live stream and you have a question that you need to ask Schele, you can reach out to Roy at capemaystage.org, and he'll be more than happy to pass it along. Schele, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This was absolutely wonderful. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks to all our viewers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.